In 2008, the world stood at a peculiar threshold. If you had looked at a map of the global economy back then, the United States and the European Union appeared as near perfect reflections of one another. They were the two undisputed titans of the West, standing shoulder to shoulder, both boasting an annual economic output of roughly $14 trillion. At that moment, Europe wasn't just a competitor, it was often the leader, setting the pace for global trade, luxury, and engineering. It was a world of balance. But if you zoom out today, that image has distorted into something unrecognizable, like a photograph left too long in the sun. While the United States embarked on a vertical ascent, surging toward a staggering $28 trillion, Europe just stayed there. It is one of the most significant economic decoupling events in modern history. It's as if one twin kept growing into a giant, fueled by a relentless drive for the new, while the other remained frozen in a state of suspended animation, now trailing its counterpart by a mind-boggling $10 trillion. Today, the average American enjoys a real income that is 35% higher than that of the average European. This is no longer a temporary dip, a streak of bad luck, or a simple recovery from a crisis. It is the story of a great divergence, a slow, systemic erosion that is threatening to turn the world's largest single market into a sprawling, beautiful museum of a bygone era. Imagine the global economy is a high-stakes race toward the technological frontier. In the American lane, the vehicles are branded with names like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Nvidia. These are the engines of the 21st century, behemoths driven by invisible lines of code, advanced silicon, and the burgeoning power of artificial intelligence. But in the European lane, the vehicles look remarkably like they did 30 years ago. They are prestigious, high-end, and expertly engineered, names like Volkswagen, BMW, and Siemens, but they are 20th century machines, perfected for a world that is rapidly disappearing in the rearview mirror. Europe has found itself caught in what economists call the middle technology trap. It has achieved world-class mastery of the things the world used to need most: internal combustion engines, complex mechanical valves, and traditional chemical processing. But while the US was busy colonizing the digital frontier and supplanting its legacy automotive giants with software powerhouses, Europe's research and development spending remained stubbornly locked in the past. In the EU, the biggest spenders on innovation are almost exclusively car manufacturers. This has led to a devastating unicorn gap. Europe is actually quite brilliant at dreaming up new ideas and launching startups, but it is fundamentally incapable of keeping them. Once a European startup hits that coveted $1 billion unicorn status, the founders look at the landscape and realize they are swimming in a shallow, fragmented pond. To find the deep water, the massive unified pools of capital, and the regulatory scale needed to become a global predator, they have no choice but to pack their bags and move to Silicon Valley, Seattle, or Austin. But why is the pond so shallow? Part of the answer lies in what we call the Brussels paradox. Europe has become a regulatory superpower. It has mastered the art of setting the global gold standard for privacy with GDPR and has now introduced the world's first comprehensive AI Act. But there is a heavy price for being the world's policeman. You cannot build a frontier if you are too busy building fences. The precautionary principle, the European philosophy that if we aren't 100% sure a technology is safe, we should restrict it, has created what many now call a bureaucratic cage. For a young entrepreneur, the sheer cost of staying compliant with a mountain of complex, overlapping rules is often higher than the cost of the actual innovation. We are effectively regulating the industries of tomorrow before we have even built them, strangling the saplings before they can become oaks. Then, there is the question of the money itself. In the United States, the financial system is built for the intelligent age. If you have a wild, transformative idea for a new algorithm, you go to venture capitalists who understand that in the modern world, code is the new gold. But in Europe, the bank is still king, and banks do not like algorithms. They like collateral. They want to see factories, heavy machinery, and land, physical assets they can seize if you fail. If you can't touch it, they won't fund it. Meanwhile, European citizens park a staggering 41% of their wealth in low-interest bank accounts, while Americans aggressively funnel theirs into the stock market. Ironically, that cautious European cash often flows into American venture funds, which then use that very money to fund the American tech giants that come back to disrupt and dominate European industry. It is a tragic, self-inflicted cycle where Europe effectively subsidizes its own obsolescence. And then, just as the continent was trying to find its footing, the lights started to flicker. For decades, the industrial heart of Europe, Germany, ran on a simple but dangerously fragile formula: cheap, abundant Russian gas. In 2022, that formula was blown to pieces by the invasion of Ukraine. Today, a factory in Europe pays nearly double for its electricity compared to a competitor in the United States. For the giants of the chemical, steel, and aluminum industries, the math simply no longer adds up. We are witnessing industrial hysteresis, a phenomenon where factories don't just pause, they vanish. Once a massive chemical complex moves from the banks of the Rhine to the Gulf Coast of Texas, it doesn't come back. The supply chains follow, the specialized talent follows, and the tax base that funds the European social model slowly evaporates. Even the crown jewel, the European automobile, is under a state of siege. The forced transition to electric vehicles has stripped away Europe's greatest competitive advantage, the sheer mechanical complexity and prestige of the engine. An EV is essentially a battery with wheels and a sophisticated software layer, and in that game, China has taken a terrifying and perhaps irreversible lead. In late 2025, for the first time in history, Chinese brands like BYD and MG officially began outselling their European rivals on European soil. The very birthplace of the automobile is watching its most iconic industry hollow out in real time, squeezed between the high-tech software of the US and the low-cost manufacturing scale of the East. Underpinning all of these crises is a silent, ticking clock, the demographic squeeze. Europe is aging faster than almost anywhere on Earth. By 2050, the median age on the continent will be 48. We are heading toward a dependency trap, a future where there will be fewer than 2 working-age people to support every retiree. To survive such a shift, Europe needs a massive, unprecedented explosion in productivity. But as we've seen, the innovation engine is stalling, and the brain drain is accelerating. A software engineer in Seattle or San Francisco can take home double or even triple the net pay of one in Berlin or Paris. Europe still offers a beautiful lifestyle dividend. The historic cafes, the public squares, the universal healthcare. But for the world's top technical talent, that dividend is no longer enough to pay for a home or a future. The talent is choosing the climb over the comfort. Mario Draghi, the man who famously promised to do whatever it takes to save the euro, recently looked at this data and gave it a haunting name, a slow agony. He warned that without a radical, painful, and immediate transformation, unifying capital markets, slashing the regulatory red tape, and investing hundreds of billions in a coordinated industrial policy, Europe will simply drift into strategic isolation. He isn't talking about a sudden crash. He's talking about a slow, quiet fade into irrelevance. But here is the real tragedy of the story. Europe has everything it needs to win. It still possesses the most educated workforce on the planet, some of the world's most advanced infrastructure, and a social model that people actually want to live in. The decline we see today is not an act of God or an inevitable law of nature. It is the cumulative result of systemic choices. It is the result of a continent that chose the safety of the past over the volatility of the future. So where does this story end? If Europe continues on its current trajectory, the map of 2040 will show a continent that has become a giant, high-end boutique. It will be a place where the wealthy from the US and China come to vacation, to admire the preserved architecture of the 19th century, and to buy luxury handbags, while the actual power, the transformative technology, and the generational wealth are generated in laboratories and boardrooms thousands of miles away. The Great Divergence is the ultimate wake-up call. It is a reminder that in the cold reality of the global economy, you are either the disruptor or the disrupted. There is no middle ground, and there is no pause button. Europe chose stability over dynamism, and it has discovered that in a rapidly changing world, stability is just another word for standing still while everyone else runs past you. The crisis isn't coming. It's already here. It's in the energy bills, the startup relocation notices, and the aging populations of small industrial towns. The only question left is whether the European Union has the political courage to break out of its own bureaucratic cage, or if it will be content to become the world's most beautiful museum. The lights are still on, and the doors are still open. But for the first time in centuries, Europe is no longer the architect of the future. It's just a tenant in a world built by someone else. And the rent is getting very, very expensive.